Thanks a lot, Margaret. I would like to welcome you all to this presentation about team relationships and performance and how that's going to change. We have been seeing a lot of conversations around this. We've been talking about it, about engagement and what have you, even before COVID. So what am I going to talk that's going to be different to that? I'm going to look at the following things. I'm going to look at what is the new normal that we're looking at and how is that going to impact performance. And what can we do differently as a result of this? There's a lot of information that needs to be covered. So I have a humble request. If you've got a question, can you please enter it in the chat box and I will pick it up at the end of the presentation. Okay, I would like to start with a story. There was a ship called Vasa, which was built by King Gustav of Sweden. He wanted to actually take control of the sea and send Portuguese sailors back to their own country. So he actually built this amazing ship and he imported materials for sails and so on and so forth. He actually installed 72 cannons so that it had immense firepower. So what appeared as a grand feat of engineering, what looked amazing, then set out to sail in 1628. It went into the sea for 1.3 miles before it sank. A sad ending to a grand project. Now, what has that got to do with our presentation? Now, this ship was recovered in 1961 and it has actually delivered a lot of insights as to why it sank. Now, when we look at all the lessons that were learned, I can classify it under three categories. One is knowledge, second one is imbalance, and the third one is scale. When the ship was built, there was nothing that was of this magnitude that existed. So there was no knowledge of engineering, there was no knowledge, and they started building it based on what they thought would help them float the boat, literally. And the second bit is when they positioned the cannons at a level which was higher than what it should be. So instead of positioning it at the belly of the ship, they positioned it slightly higher, which caused this imbalance. And not only that, they added 2 levels of cannons instead of 1. So that caused the scales to tip. But then when we really look at what amplified it, is the scales that were used. Agreed that they had all the right measures, everything was provided to them. King Gustav had used carpenters from Amsterdam and carpenters from Sweden to build the ship. Now, when they looked at the scales which were used by the carpenters in Amsterdam, 1 feet was 11 inches, whereas in the Swedish side, 1 feet was 12 inches. Right from the beginning, one portion was 1 inch thinner or thicker, depending on how you look at it, built. So that basically caused an imbalance. So when you look at that, lack of knowledge, using wrong measures, caused this catastrophe. Now, if you have to take this and apply it in our scenario, we're looking at knowledge. We have not seen things like this. The COVID lockdown, we haven't experienced anything like this. So we need to be wary of what is the body of knowledge that we're going to build before we start talking about performance and understanding how it can actually manifest in a productive scenario, which results in positive performance. And when you try to build the body of knowledge, you try to understand what are the things that can actually make it fail to address the issues of imbalance. Now, we're going to be talking about that. And then the third bit is around scale. What are you going to use to measure the impact of all this? How are you going to show that you're doing the right thing and you're doing it to progress the organization at the right stage? Okay, let's start with knowledge. The scenario that we have all been through, even our parents haven't been through this. So we don't have a rule book or a guidebook which we can refer to help us bring things back to normalcy. So there's a talk of this is the new normal. What do you mean by that? People have been reflecting. When we look at their lives for the past 100 days, the balance between work and life has actually virtually blended. So they have started reflecting on what work is, what life is, what is that they want out of all of this. Those questions have come in. And that basically has got them to reflect much more deeper. And there are various decisions that have been made from a work perspective and from a personal perspective, which is going to impact all this. Without understanding what this is, we cannot expect people to come and behave as everything is normal. So we need to understand what has changed and how is it impacting people's perception. Because when your head is not in the right space, you are not going to be delivering the kind of performance metrics that you're expected to achieve. So we need to understand what the new normal is. Why is it important? Because it's the right thing to do. If we are saying employees are our assets, we need to actually find a way to nurture them. And to nurture them, you need to understand how their perceptions have changed and how that's going to impact performance and productivity going forward. So don't look at it as a CSR initiative. Don't look at it as something like a PR initiative. It's your moral responsibility. If you want optimal performance, your head has to be in the right space. So you need to actually understand what's going on behind the screens. When we talk about getting the head in the right space, there's a lot of talk about well-being at this point in time. People are talking about how well-being is impacting general ability to perform. I read a statistics from the ONS that 50% of people aged 16 or over expressed high levels of anxiety. That's roughly 25 million people in the workforce. That's a lot. And if their head is not in the right space and if they are anxious, we need to understand how do you get them to perform. And to do that, you need to address their challenges from a well-being point of view. Now, if I look at what's happening in this space, a lot of money has been invested. The market is worth $40 billion and it's growing at the rate of 6 or 7% every year on year. So if you really look at it, what started off as a health and fitness initiative now has progressed into the well-being conversation. Now, if you look at the x-axis, of course, all this you do it with the view to improve business performance. So here, when the well-being needs are met, it impacts productivity and enhances collaboration. If your head is not in the right space, you're not going to be productive. Even pre-COVID, there was a lot of incentives, initiatives that were happening in the well-being space. Productivity was not going up. And given that we are coming out of the lockdown and cash is going to be tighter, the influence of well-being initiatives on individuals matters more. More importantly, it has got to reflect on performance. It's got to help organizations deliver performance in a sustainable way. At the moment, we are not questioning the return on investment on well-being initiatives. But trust me, that conversation is going to come very, very soon. Now, that's where leaders play a vital role. They are responsible for building a positive culture. They are responsible for ensuring that people are very clear in their goals. Their purposes are met. And they actually reward people in the right way. The work environment is amazing. And all this will happen only if leaders believe in it. And to do that, we need to actually understand what is going on currently. And that's why we talk of the new normal. When you address that, then you can start talking about collaboration, which is about building relationships. We talked about knowledge. Now let's talk about balance. Having understood what the new normal is, first thing we need to do is bridge the gap between where their head is to where you want it to be. And you can do a lot of things, but the first thing you need to do is address their well-being needs. And to do that, you need to invest in certain well-being initiatives at the individual level. Don't think that a one-size-fits-all approach would work, because that's never going to help you reach the wider audience. Get your managers to talk to their team members. This is the time to reach out. And this is the time to actually build relationships. So if you're talking of well-being, that can actually be enhanced only if you start talking to your team through your managers and building those relationships. Have human connection. When I say human connection, there are a lot of things that I can talk about. As a species, we crave for social conversations and connections. So when you're talking to people, when your manager is talking to people, their team members, ask them to be respectful. Ask them to really value the input that the other person is giving. How do you do that? You actually demonstrate it by demonstrating empathy, trust, respect. All these things matter. A very good friend of mine, he said, when I talk to someone in my organization, irrespective of whatever role they are in, whatever position they are in, when they come to me, I talk to them and look at them and listen to them as though they are the most important person in the whole wide world. And I actually mean that. That's what he said. So there is a role of empathy, role of trust that happens. As leaders, then you're responsible for building a culture that can help fuel that. Now, if you don't have empathy, don't respect people, you lack human connection, and the culture is negative, that can upset the balance. Ultimately, it falls on you. If you remember in the previous graph, leadership comes the last bit because that's where leaders start building positive culture. Collaboration kicks in only when leaders start modeling behavior. So that's where you need to start focusing it. What do I mean by the human connection? What is the importance of that? Now, when we talk of performance, performance happens when people use processes or when people work with other people to deliver something. And that will happen only when they engage with the people or engage with the process. Engagement will happen only when the team member has a good experience of either the process or the team member or working with the manager or with that role. That experience is shaped by the quality of relationships. So at a deeper level, relationships influence your experience, which then fuels your engagement, which then gets you to behave in the right form, which then allows you to deliver the performance that is expected. Now, if you're a leader, your primary responsibility after understanding what the challenges are from a knowledge perspective, from a well-being perspective, address that and start building relationships. And by that I mean really looking at the role of empathy, trust, and respect. You need to build a back of goodwill. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach when you're trying to gain respect, gain trust. Now, as a leader, you need to ask, what is the culture that you're trying to set? Is it people versus profits? Is there a conflict there? Or is it just a window dressing? If it's not a conflict, it's not a window dressing, that's something which is going to have a very, very positive impact. If it's going to be profits over people, or if it's style over substance, it's going to create an imbalance. In someone in the leadership role, you need to ask, what is your DQ? DQ is your decency quotient. What is your DQ? Start looking for that. Find answers to that. You need to model the behavior that you expect from your team members. You cannot expect them to walk the walk if you don't actually do it for them. So imbalance or balance can actually occur when relationships are fractured. So despite having the knowledge, if you don't invest in relationship quality, your team performance is going to suffer. Because if you want to move well-being initiatives or address the well-being and move them to the next level of performance, which is sustainable, relationships play the vital role. And that can actually be enhanced when you start building a culture, when you're being decent, when you start modeling your behavior and start measuring all this. That's where the next thing kicks in. What do you measure? Do you measure relationship quality? Yes, we can. And in fact, Riddlebox does measure relationship quality. Can we measure the well-being initiatives? Can we understand what is the well-being need? Yes, you can. And can you link it back to performance? Yes, you can. There are so many things you can, but you need to ask the question, is it relevant? And how is it going to impact individuals? There is no point in measuring things because you want to measure it. You need to ask the question, how is it actually going to help me? Help my team perform? How is it going to help build great relationships with the team? So if I am introducing a well-being initiative, how do I assess the effectiveness of the interventions on that individual? Because if that individual well-being need is not met, it is not going to help them, which means it's going to impact organization performance. So you need to understand how that can be achieved. When you don't question the relevance of the metrics and really think it through, you'll be measuring the wrong thing, and that can actually have a serious impact. Going back to the story of Vasa, we saw knowledge or the lack of it, imbalance in scale can upset any project. Given the current scenario, our knowledge of what the new normal is or isn't can actually impact how we perceive work to be, what performance is. By understanding the quality of relationships that you need to build and how you can build your culture and how do you bring that positivity, or what, by understanding what can upset the good work that you've done, you address the imbalance. Then you start saying, okay, I've understood what the individual is, where the individual is coming from, what their well-being needs are. By addressing that, I can then start building relationships, and I should not do certain things to address that imbalance. How do you ensure then whatever you're doing is actually having an impact? That's where you start thinking about metrics. So I've used this to bring things together. I know it's a very short presentation and I've rushed through quite a bit. So, but if you want to have a more specific conversation, there's a webinar which I have actually gone for an hour talking about this in detail. Please let me know. I can share the webinar link. Now, how do you bring this together? We can actually start, let's say, from a fundamental point of view, knowledge. We're trying to understand what does an individual need. Get your managers to talk to their team members to understand what are their well-being challenges. Understand what are the concerns. Then discuss with them as a team, as managers, to understand how it is actually manifesting in work. For example, you could say, what is it actually doing? If they are not able to sleep, how is it going to impact the performance? And what is it going to reflect as? Is it financial stress that's causing it? Is it work-life balance that's causing it? And then link it back to something which basically is going to impact their ability to deliver in their roles. Then start talking about specific interventions that can be put in place to address that problem with a view to address the core issues, which then gets them in the right place. That's how you start bringing things together. We try to think about a solution as to how we can bring this together. So we are going to be launching an app in a couple of weeks. And that app is going to bring together your well-being needs, linking it back to performance, and so on and so forth. You can see some of the functionalities that are already there. We are planning to give this app to any business that wants to start on this journey. All we're saying is use the app, get your team in the right space. And if you think it's worth X, pay us that amount. If you think it's worth £5 per employee per month, pay that. If you think it's worth £5 per annum for your entire workforce, pay that. But if you think it's not worth paying anything but you love it, please continue to use that. We want to do this because we believe that this is a challenge where we all have to work together. We've not seen anything like this before. When we work together, we can come out positively. And it's our way of giving something back to the business community. So if you need more information about how you can use the Wellbeing app, please feel free to get in touch. I will take questions now if you have any. Thank you.